The notification chimed at 11:47 p.m., just as I was finishing up a client's database migration. My phone lit up with Nora's name, and I felt that familiar flutter of anticipation that even 3 years together hadn't dulled. Working late again. Trevor offered to drive me home since it's raining. Don't wait up, XO. I stared at the screen for a moment. Trevor. The name had been popping up more frequently lately. Gym buddy, work friend, the guy who apparently had solutions for every minor inconvenience in Nora's life. Car trouble? Trevor knew a mechanic. Bad day at work? Trevor recommended the perfect wine bar. Rainy night? Trevor had an umbrella and a generous spirit. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. A dozen responses cycled through my mind, each one tinged with the suspicion I'd been trying to suppress for weeks. Instead, I typed the simplest reply. If you say so, drive safe. Her response came back immediately. Thanks, babe. Love you. I set the phone down and returned to my screen, but the code blurred in front of me. If you say so. The phrase echoed in my mind, carrying more weight than I'd intended. It wasn't acceptance, it was resignation. The kind of thing you say when you're tired of asking questions that never get straight answers. I'd been here before, haven't I? The late nights that multiplied like a virus. The phone calls taken in the bathroom. The way she'd started dressing nicer for work, claiming some new client demanded a more polished look. The distance that crept in slowly, so gradually that questioning it made me feel paranoid. My laptop pinged with another notification. This one was from our shared cloud storage. A photo Nora had uploaded from tonight. It showed her at what looked like a restaurant, not the office, raising a martini glass with a perfectly manicured hand. The timestamp read 9:23 p.m. I checked her location sharing, disabled. When had that happened? I trusted her. That was my first mistake. Checking her GPS history would be my last act of naivety. 3 months earlier, everything had been different. Or at least, it had seemed different. I think I'm ready, I had told my brother Jake over beers at Murphy's Tavern, watching Nora laugh with his girlfriend across the booth. I'm going to propose. Jake had raised his eyebrows. About time, man. You two are solid. She's good for you. Solid. That's exactly how it felt back then. Nora Hartwell and I made sense on paper and in practice. I was the steady software engineer with a downtown condo and a growing consulting business. She was the ambitious marketing coordinator at Meridian Communications, all sharp wit and big dreams. We complemented each other perfectly, my analytical nature grounding her creative flights, her social energy drawing me out of my programmer cave. We'd met at a charity tech event where her firm was sponsoring the bar and mine was providing the registration system. She'd approached me when the tablet crashed during check-in, not with the usual exasperated demands I got from event planners, but with genuine curiosity about what had gone wrong. Is it the network or the hardware? She'd asked, peering over my shoulder as I diagnosed the problem. Network congestion, I'd replied, surprised by the technical question. Too many devices hitting the same access point. Can you fix it, or should we go old school with a clipboard? I'd fixed it in 5 minutes and asked her to coffee in 10. 3 years later, we were sharing a lease, a Netflix account, and what I'd thought were life plans. The changes had been subtle at first. Nora's work schedule became more demanding as she angled for a promotion to account manager. The marketing team was expanding, bringing in new talent and new clients. She'd always been social, but suddenly her social circle was expanding too, filled with colleagues whose names I struggled to keep straight. Trevor Daniels had entered our lives about 6 months ago, introduced casually during one of Nora's work stories. This new guy Trevor started in our division, she'd said, scrolling through her phone during dinner. Used to work for some big agency in Chicago. He's got ideas about restructuring our whole approach to digital campaigns. Sounds disruptive, I'd replied, only half listening. In a good way. He's actually brilliant. Really gets the psychology behind consumer behavior. I should have paid more attention to the way her voice changed when she talked about him, animated in a way that my database stories never managed to inspire. But I was busy too, launching a new project with a fintech startup that demanded 16-hour days and weekend coding sessions. By the time I noticed the pattern, it was already entrenched. Nora's team-building exercises that somehow always included Trevor. The work dinners where she'd come home gushing about innovative strategies they'd discussed. The gym membership she'd suddenly acquired because some of the work crew goes to this great place downtown. I'd been supportive, encouraging even. I wanted her to succeed, to find her professional tribe, to feel challenged and fulfilled. I'd seen what happened to couples where one partner felt professionally stagnant. Jake's previous relationship had imploded exactly that way. Looking back now, scrolling through 3 months of increasingly suspicious behavior, I realized I'd been the perfect mark. Trusting, distracted, so focused on being the supportive boyfriend that I'd missed every red flag. The next morning, Nora was already gone when I woke up. A note on the kitchen counter explained she'd gotten called in early for a client crisis. Her coffee mug sat in the sink, lipstick still staining the rim. I'd always been good with data. It's what made me successful as a consultant, the ability to spot patterns, to see the story that numbers told when you knew how to read them. As I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, I realized I'd been ignoring the biggest data set of my life. Nora and I shared everything digitally. Cloud storage, streaming accounts, even a family plan that let me see general location data for billing purposes. She'd insisted on it early in our relationship, claiming it made her feel safer when she traveled for work. "This way, you'll know I made it to the hotel safely," she'd said. Now, staring at 3 months of location data, I felt sick. The pattern was undeniable. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, Nora's phone had been at an address on Elm Street, not her office, not her gym, not any restaurant or bar we'd visited together. Cross-referencing with her work calendar showed these times consistently fell during periods she'd claimed to be at the office working late or out with the girls. I pulled up property records for the Elm Street address. Trevor Daniels, apartment 4B. My hands were shaking as I opened our shared bank account. 3 months of charges painted an even clearer picture. Dinner for 2 at Chez Laurent on a Tuesday when she'd told me she was working through dinner. Uber rides that originated from Trevor's building. Charges at a wine store near his apartment on days she'd claimed to be shopping with her sister. But it was the recurring charge that made my stomach drop. A monthly fee to something called Nestaway Suites. A quick Google search revealed it was a company that provided short-term furnished apartments for corporate relocations and extended business travelers. My phone buzzed with a text from Nora. "Another late one tonight? Don't hold dinner." I stared at the message, then at the screen showing her location data from the past month. Every late night at the office had ended at Trevor's address. Every team dinner had been a party of 2. Every excuse had been a lie. She hadn't just been cheating on me. She'd been living a double life, complete with a second residence and a credit trail showing romantic dinners, shared Ubers, and what appeared to be a fully functional relationship with another man. I pulled up LinkedIn and searched for Trevor Daniels at Meridian Communications. His profile picture showed a man in his mid-30s with sharp features and the kind of confident smile that belonged in a stock photo about success. His bio mentioned his wife Rebecca and their 2 young children in the interests section. My anger crystallized into something colder, more focused. This wasn't just about Nora's betrayal anymore. Trevor was married with kids, and judging by his social media posts, Rebecca Daniels thought she had a devoted husband who worked late to provide for their family. I'd spent my whole adult life being the nice guy, the one who gave people the benefit of the doubt, who assumed good intentions, who played by the rules because I believed others did too. Sitting in my kitchen surrounded by evidence of systematic deception, I felt that version of myself cracking like old paint. They thought they were so clever, conducting their affair with all the sophistication of corporate planning. What they'd forgotten was that I made my living finding hidden patterns in complex systems. And they'd left digital breadcrumbs everywhere. I approached the situation the way I'd approach any major project, with a timeline, deliverables, and measurable objectives. The difference was that instead of debugging someone's code, I was debugging my life. Phase 1 was reconnaissance. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with before making any moves. Every good engineer knows that the first rule of fixing a broken system is documenting how broken it actually is. I created a secured partition on my laptop and began building what I privately called the archive. Every piece of evidence got categorized, time-stamped, and backed up in 3 separate locations: screenshots of location data, copies of financial records, saved social media posts, and a detailed timeline that stretched back 6 months. The deeper I dug, the more elaborate their deception became. Nora had been maintaining separate social media accounts I'd never known about. Her professional Instagram was full of photos from expensive restaurants and wine bars, often featuring Trevor's hand in the frame or his reflection in mirrors. The captions were crafted to be vague enough for plausible deniability. "Great strategy session tonight," accompanied by a photo of 2 wine glasses, but clear enough for anyone actually paying attention. Trevor's accounts were more careful but equally revealing. His Twitter showed a pattern of checking in at the same locations as Nora, often within minutes of her posts. His LinkedIn activity showed he'd been endorsing her skills and commenting on her posts with the kind of enthusiasm that went beyond professional courtesy. But the smoking gun was Spotify. Our shared family account showed not just Nora's listening history, but collaborative playlists she'd created with other users. Late Night Vibes had been created with an account named TD_Chicago47. Trevor Daniels, age 47, originally from Chicago, according to his LinkedIn. The playlist was updated almost daily. Love songs, slow jazz, and R&B tracks with titles like All of Me, Best Part, and Golden. The kind of soundtrack to a relationship that thinks it's hidden but can't help leaving traces. I spent a week in this reconnaissance phase, working late into the night while Nora was presumably with Trevor. She'd text me updates throughout these evenings, grabbed dinner with colleagues, working on a presentation, stuck in traffic, while her location data showed her parked at his apartment building. The most damning evidence was accidental. Nora had left her laptop open after a work-from-home day, and I'd glanced at the screen while bringing her coffee. Her email was open to a thread with Trevor about weekend plans. The subject line was, "Our place or yours?" And the conversation was clearly about choosing between his apartment and the Nestaway rental for their Saturday night. That's when I realized the scope of what I was dealing with. This wasn't an affair, it was a parallel relationship. They had pet names for each other, inside jokes, shared expenses, and future plans. Nora was living 2 complete lives, switching between them with the ease of someone changing browser tabs. I documented everything with the methodical precision I'd learned from years of debugging complex systems. Every piece of evidence was verified, cross-referenced, and stored securely. By the end of the week, I had a digital case file that would make a private investigator proud. But documentation was just phase 1. Phase 2 would require understanding the professional landscape I was about to disrupt. Meridian Communications was bigger than I'd realized. What Nora had always described as a mid-size marketing firm turned out to be a division of MediaMax Corporation, a publicly traded company with offices in 6 states and a stock price that responded poorly to scandals. Their website's About Us section painted a picture of family values and professional integrity. CEO Margaret Walsh had been featured in Forbes for her commitment to ethical workplace culture and the company's zero-tolerance policy on harassment and professional misconduct. I spent my lunch breaks reading MediaMax's annual reports and SEC filings. As a public company, they were meticulous about documenting their policies on employee conduct, potential conflicts of interest, and the procedures for reporting violations. The employee handbook was available online for potential hires, and it was a goldmine of relevant information. Section 4.3 dealt with romantic relationships between employees. It was surprisingly detailed, requiring disclosure of any romantic relationship between colleagues, immediate reassignment if there was a power dynamic issue, and termination for anyone who failed to disclose such relationships within 30 days of their commencement. Section 6.1 covered misuse of company resources, which included using corporate credit cards for personal expenses and claiming personal travel as business expenses. Section 8.4 was titled Conduct Reflecting on Company Reputation and included social media guidelines that prohibited posting content that could embarrass or damage the company's professional image. Trevor's LinkedIn profile listed him as a senior account director, which meant he outranked Nora's marketing coordinator position by 2 levels. According to the organizational chart I found in their quarterly report, he would have influence over her performance reviews, project assignments, and promotion opportunities. I cross-referenced this with the financial evidence I'd gathered. The romantic dinners, the shared Uber rides, the weekend trips, all of it happening while Trevor was in a position to affect Nora's career trajectory. From a corporate perspective, it wasn't just a violation of disclosure policies. It was a potential abuse of power that opened the company up to lawsuit liability. But the most interesting discovery came from digging deeper into Trevor's background. His previous employer in Chicago had been acquired by a competitor under circumstances that included a scandal involving inappropriate employee relationships. The details were vague in the press coverage, but the timeline aligned with Trevor's sudden job change 6 months ago. MediaMax had hired someone with a history of workplace relationship issues and failed to properly monitor his conduct. Their HR department was about to have a very bad week. I researched the reporting procedures carefully. Anonymous tips could be submitted through an online portal that fed directly to the corporate compliance office. All reports were investigated by an external firm to avoid internal bias. The company was legally required to act on substantiated claims within 48 hours of verification. The beauty of corporate compliance systems is that they're designed to be thorough and impartial. Once a formal complaint was filed with proper evidence, the company had no choice but to investigate fully. Their stock price and regulatory standing depended on being able to demonstrate ethical workplace practices. I spent an evening crafting the perfect report. It was factual, well-documented, and included every piece of evidence I'd gathered that related to workplace conduct. The personal betrayal was painful, but the professional misconduct was actionable. But I wasn't ready to file it yet. I needed to ensure maximum impact, which meant timing the revelation for when it would cause the most comprehensive disruption to the life they'd built on lies. Rebecca Daniels was easier to find than I'd expected. Social media had made everyone an open book if you knew how to read the pages. Her Facebook profile was set to public, probably to promote the small interior design business she ran from home. The photos told the story of a woman trying to balance career ambitions with raising 2 young children while her husband worked long hours at his demanding new job. Recent posts painted a picture that made my anger burn colder. Rebecca celebrating Trevor's promotion at MediaMax with a home-cooked dinner. Rebecca explaining to friends why Trevor couldn't make weekend social events because he was establishing himself in a competitive new market. Rebecca defending their decision to limit family vacations because Trevor's workload was temporarily intense but worth it for their future. She was living my life in reverse, making excuses for a partner's absence, believing in a shared future that was built on lies, trusting someone who was systematically deceiving her. The children were young, a daughter who looked about 6 and a son who couldn't have been more than 4 based on the birthday party photos. They called Trevor Daddy in the videos Rebecca posted, and their faces lit up in the rare photos where he was actually present. I found myself staring at a family photo from last Christmas. Trevor had his arms around Rebecca and the kids in front of what was clearly their family home, a suburban colonial with a minivan in the driveway and children's bicycles on the front porch. The caption read, "Grateful for my hard-working husband and the beautiful life we're building together." The timestamp was from exactly 3 weeks after Trevor and Nora's first documented dinner at Chez Laurent. My phone buzzed with a text from Nora. "Working late again. This project is killing me, but Trevor thinks we're close to a breakthrough. Probably won't be home until after midnight. Love you." I looked at the message, then back at Rebecca's Facebook page. At that moment, I realized I wasn't just seeking revenge for my own betrayal. Rebecca deserved to know the truth about the man she was making sacrifices for. Those children deserved better than a father who was living a double life. But I was also pragmatic enough to recognize that Rebecca's reaction could be a powerful catalyst for the kind of comprehensive disruption I was planning. A betrayed wife with children and a public social media presence could generate the kind of attention that would make corporate damage control impossible. I began documenting Rebecca's online presence the same way I'd documented everything else: her business website, her social media accounts, her connections to Trevor's extended family and professional network. I wasn't planning to contact her directly. That felt too much like weaponizing someone else's pain for my own purposes. But I wanted to understand the full scope of lives that would be affected when the truth came out. Trevor wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was stealing time and attention from his children, lying to his extended family, and building his new relationship on the foundation of resources that belonged to his real family. The more I learned about Rebecca, the more I realized that she and I were victims of the same con game. We'd both believed we were in committed relationships with people who had simply found more appealing alternatives. The difference was that I'd stumbled onto the truth accidentally, while she was still living in the fabricated reality her husband had created. When I finally acted, I wanted to make sure Rebecca had access to the same information I did, not as an act of revenge, but as an act of justice. Friday night arrived with another familiar text from Nora. Weekend strategy retreat with the team. Checking into that resort in Blue Ridge for some intensive planning sessions. Won't have great cell service, but will text when I can. Miss you already. I replied with my usual supportive message while watching her location data in real time. Instead of heading west toward Blue Ridge, she was driving north, directly toward Trevor's apartment building. This was it. This was the weekend I'd been waiting for. 3 days when they thought they were completely safe, completely unmonitored, free to live their fantasy without the burden of maintaining their lies. I had 3 days to dismantle everything they'd built. Saturday morning, I drove to Trevor's neighborhood and parked at a coffee shop with a clear view of his apartment building. I wasn't there to spy. I had all the evidence I needed. I was there to verify the final details of their routine so I could time my actions for maximum disruption. At 9:30 a.m., they emerged together. Trevor was carrying an overnight bag, and Nora had the kind of relaxed, intimate body language that comes from spending the night somewhere familiar. They walked to his car like a couple running weekend errands, completely comfortable and unself-conscious. I followed at a distance as they drove to a farmer's market downtown. Watching them browse vegetables and sample coffee like a normal Saturday couple was surreal. This was the life they'd carved out for themselves, domestic and ordinary, built on the wreckage of 2 other relationships. They looked happy. That was the part that hurt most. Not stolen moments of passion happy, but grocery shopping, weekend plans, what should we have for lunch happy. The kind of happiness that suggested this wasn't a fling or a mistake, but a deliberate choice to replace their existing lives with something they preferred. I took photos from a distance, not for evidence, but for clarity. I needed to see them the way the world would see them when the truth came out. Not as star-crossed lovers, but as 2 people who'd decided their personal happiness was worth more than anyone else's trust or stability. By Sunday morning, I was ready. I'd spent the weekend finalizing every detail, backing up every file, and preparing for a Monday that would change multiple lives forever. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Corporate complaints filed at 9 a.m. when the compliance office opened. Financial accounts secured by 10 a.m. before Nora realized what was happening. Rebecca's information packet delivered by 11 a.m. while Trevor was still dealing with the professional fallout. Everything would cascade from there. Trevor's suspension pending investigation, Nora's panic when she discovered her financial access cut off, Rebecca's confrontation with evidence of her husband's double life. By the time they figured out what was happening, it would be too late to contain the damage. I spent Sunday night packing Nora's belongings into boxes. Not vindictively, but methodically. She'd been living 2 lives, Now she could choose which one to continue. Our shared apartment would no longer be an option. As I folded her clothes and sorted her possessions, I found myself thinking about the woman I'd fallen in love with 3 years ago. Had that person ever been real, or was she just another performance? Had there been genuine feelings before Trevor, or had I always been a placeholder? It didn't matter anymore. The woman who'd laughed at my jokes and made plans for our future had made her choice when she started building a different future with someone else. Monday morning would bring clarity for everyone involved. Monday, 8:47 a.m. I sat in my car outside Media Max's corporate headquarters, watching employees stream through the glass doors to start their week. In 3 minutes, the compliance office would officially open, and I would file the report that would set everything in motion. My laptop was connected to my phone's hotspot, 3 backup drives secured in my briefcase, and a timeline of actions mapped out to the minute. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about precision. At exactly 9 a.m., I submitted the formal complaint through Media Max's anonymous reporting portal. The document was 15 pages long, meticulously researched, and included time-stamped evidence of policy violations, potential harassment, and misuse of company resources. Every claim was supported by documentation that could be independently verified. The system confirmed receipt and assigned case number M/X 2024-0847. According to their published procedures, initial review would happen within 4 hours, with formal investigation beginning immediately upon preliminary verification. At 9:15 a.m., I called the joint credit card company from my car. I need to report suspicious activity on our shared account, I explained to the fraud prevention specialist. Charges in locations where neither cardholder should have been. Patterns consistent with identity theft. The representative was sympathetic and efficient. All cards were immediately frozen pending investigation. Nora would discover this when she tried to buy coffee or gas, probably within the next few hours. At 9:30 a.m., I visited the bank that held our joint checking account. The process was more complex here, but I'd done my homework. As the primary account holder, I could freeze the account pending resolution of suspected fraud. Nora's access would be suspended until she could appear in person with proper identification to verify her identity and address recent, unusual spending patterns. At 9:45 a.m., I changed the locks on our apartment. The locksmith I'd hired was discreet and efficient, replacing both the main door and the deadbolt within 30 minutes. Nora's keys would no longer work when she tried to return home. At 10:20 a.m., while sitting in a Starbucks near Rebecca Daniels' neighborhood, I created an anonymous email account and composed a message that would destroy Trevor's home life as thoroughly as he'd damaged mine. The email was simple and factual. I attached the most damning evidence: photos of Trevor and Nora together, screenshots of their romantic text conversations, documentation of charges to romantic restaurants on dates when Trevor had claimed to be working late, and the address of the nestaway apartment they'd been sharing. I included one personal note. Rebecca, I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but you deserve to know the truth about how your husband spends his time and your family's resources. You and your children deserve better than lies. I hit send at 10:30 a.m. and watched the message disappear into cyberspace, carrying with it the destruction of another carefully constructed facade. At 11 a.m., I received an automated email from Media Max's compliance system. Your report is under active investigation. Initial review has determined sufficient cause for immediate administrative action pending full inquiry. At 11:15 a.m., my phone started ringing. Nora's number flashed on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. By 11:30 a.m., I had 6 voicemails and 12 text messages. The progression told the story of her morning. Confusion when her coffee card was declined, concern when the bank froze their joint account, panic when she realized the scope of what was happening. The texts evolved from confused, "Why are our cards not working?" to worried, "Is everything okay? Call me back," to desperate, "Please call me. Something is wrong with all our accounts and I can't figure out what happened." At 11:45 a.m., she called from Trevor's phone. I answered. What the hell is going on? Her voice was strained, higher pitched than usual. All our accounts are frozen. I can't get into the apartment, and nobody at the bank will tell me anything without you present. I found out about Trevor, I said simply. The silence stretched for 15 seconds. I could hear traffic in the background, which meant she was probably calling from the parking lot at Media Max. I don't know what you think you found. I know about the apartment on Elm Street. I know about the Spotify playlists. I know about every dinner, every lie, every time you told me you were working late while you were building a life with someone else. Another silence, shorter this time. We need to talk, she said, and I could hear the calculation in her voice. She was already shifting strategies, moving from denial to damage control. We really don't, I replied. Your stuff is packed and in storage unit 247 at Secure Space on Highland Avenue. The key is with the office manager. You have until the end of the month before they start charging rent. You can't just... I hung up and turned off my phone. I wasn't interested in negotiations or explanations. The data had told me everything I needed to know about her priorities and character. By noon, I was sitting in my office, monitoring social media and news feeds for any signs that the corporate investigation had become public. It wouldn't be long now. Media Max's stock price was steady, which meant the news hadn't leaked yet, but corporate compliance moved fast when properly motivated. The real fireworks would start when Trevor tried to explain to Rebecca why his colleague's husband had sent her detailed evidence of their affair. That conversation would happen today, probably within the next few hours. I opened a new project folder on my laptop and began working on a client's database optimization. It felt good to solve problems that actually had clean solutions. By Tuesday morning, the cascading effects were becoming visible across multiple fronts. LinkedIn showed that Trevor Daniels was no longer listed as employed by Media Max Corporation. His profile had been updated to show his previous Chicago position as his most recent role, which meant Media Max had moved quickly to distance themselves from the scandal. Rebecca Daniels' Facebook page had been scrubbed of most family photos, and her relationship status had changed from married to unspecified. Her most recent post was a simple statement: taking time to focus on my children and myself. Thank you to everyone who has reached out with support. The comments section told a clearer story. Friends and family expressing shock, offering help with the kids, asking if she needed anything. The social fabric of Trevor's extended network was unraveling in real time as people processed the news of his double life. Nora had been calling from different numbers: Trevor's phone, office landlines, numbers I didn't recognize. I'd blocked them all after listening to the first few voicemails, which followed a predictable arc from anger, "You had no right to destroy my career," to bargaining, "Can we please just talk about this like adults?" to what sounded like genuine distress, "I know I hurt you, but this is ruining everything for everyone." That last voicemail was the closest she'd come to acknowledging the scope of what she'd done, but it was still framed in terms of what was being done to her rather than what she'd done to others. Even facing the consequences of her choices, she couldn't quite grasp that she'd been an active participant in deception rather than a victim of circumstances. The professional fallout was exactly what I'd predicted. Media Max's compliance investigation had moved with corporate efficiency. Trevor's access to company systems had been revoked Monday afternoon. By Tuesday, his company car had been retrieved and his corporate credit cards canceled. The investigation was still ongoing, but his employment status had been terminated pending final review. For a public company, the potential liability of allowing a senior employee to conduct an undisclosed relationship with a subordinate was too great to ignore. Even if Trevor's relationship with Nora had been entirely consensual, his failure to disclose it violated multiple policies. The evidence of company resources being used for personal expenses made termination inevitable. Nora's situation was more complex. As the subordinate in the relationship, she could claim she'd been pressured or coerced, but the evidence I'd provided showed her as an equal participant in deception, including her own misuse of company resources and false reporting of her activities. Her employment status was listed as under review, which meant she was probably suspended while they decided whether termination was warranted. From a career perspective, both of them would struggle to recover. MediaMax was well connected in their industry, and termination for policy violations would follow them to future opportunities. The marketing and advertising world was smaller than people realized, especially at the senior levels where Trevor had been operating. But the personal consequences were more interesting to watch unfold. Trevor's social media presence had gone dark after Monday. No updates, no responses to the concerned comments on his older posts. His Twitter account, which had been active with industry insights and professional networking, hadn't posted anything since Friday. I wondered what his conversations with Rebecca had been like. How do you explain to your wife that you've been maintaining a second relationship complete with a separate apartment and shared expenses? How do you justify 6 months of systematic deception while she's been making sacrifices to support your career advancement? The children were too young to understand the details, but they'd certainly noticed that Daddy wasn't coming home and Mommy was upset. Rebecca's sister had posted on Facebook about helping with the kids during a difficult time, which suggested Rebecca had people supporting her through the crisis. That was good. She'd need help navigating divorce proceedings, especially with 2 young children and a husband whose employment status had just imploded. Trevor's earning potential had been severely damaged, which would affect child support calculations and custody arrangements. By Wednesday, I was ready for the final phase. Wednesday brought the news I'd been waiting for. A local business journalist had picked up the story of MediaMax's personnel changes, though she didn't have all the details yet. The article was buried in the business section under the headline, MediaMax Faces Internal Investigation. It mentioned that 2 employees had been terminated or suspended following an anonymous complaint about policy violations and potential misuse of company resources. The article noted that MediaMax stock had dropped 2% on the news, as investors worried about potential legal liability. What made the article interesting was the quote from CEO Margaret Walsh. MediaMax takes workplace conduct seriously and will continue to investigate any actions that contradict our values of integrity and professional excellence. We have zero tolerance for behavior that creates liability for our shareholders or compromises our workplace culture. In corporate speak, that was a clear signal that more terminations might be coming and that the company was prioritizing damage control over employee loyalty. The article included enough details about the timeline and departments involved that anyone familiar with MediaMax's structure could probably identify the employees in question. Trevor and Nora's professional networks would be drawing conclusions by now. More importantly, the public nature of the scandal meant that both of them would struggle to control the narrative. They couldn't dismiss this as a private relationship issue when their employer had found their conduct serious enough to warrant termination and public disclosure. I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. This wasn't just personal revenge. It was professional accountability. Trevor had abused his position to pursue a relationship with a subordinate while lying to his wife and children. Nora had participated in deception that violated her employment agreement and damaged the trust of multiple people who cared about her. They'd made calculated choices to prioritize their own desires over everyone else's well-being. Now they were facing the calculated consequences of those choices. But I wasn't done yet. There was one more conversation I needed to have. I turned my phone back on for the first time since Monday and scrolled through the accumulated messages. 43 voicemails, 97 text messages, and dozens of missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Most of the messages followed predictable patterns, Nora trying every strategy from anger to manipulation to genuine-seeming remorse. Trevor had left a few messages too, his voice tight with controlled rage as he accused me of destroying innocent people's lives over a personal vendetta. That phrase stuck with me. Innocent people. As if Rebecca and her children weren't innocent people whose lives had been disrupted by his choices. as if I hadn't been an innocent person trying to build a future with someone who was secretly building a different future with someone else. But there was one message that was different. Jake, my brother, had called Tuesday night. "Hey man, Sarah just showed me something on Facebook about Nora. I don't know what's true, but are you okay?" It was the first crack in the dam. Family finding out. Friends were starting to connect the dots. This was no longer just between Nora, Trevor, and me. The truth was leaking outward, into circles they couldn't control, into conversations they couldn't intercept. And that's when I realized the personal part of this story was already finished. I had done what I needed to do. From here on out, the destruction wasn't mine to manage. It was momentum. A system I'd set in motion that would run on its own until there was nothing left for them to salvage. Trevor and Nora thought they could build a second life in secret. What they forgot is that secrets don't survive daylight, and by morning, the daylight would be blinding. The voicemail from Jake was still echoing in my head when the first ripple hit the surface. By Thursday morning, MediaMax's scandal wasn't just an internal memo. It had spilled into the world outside those glass headquarters. The very thing I'd predicted in Chapter 10 had begun materializing, almost like clockwork. At 7:42 a.m., an industry newsletter I subscribed to dropped into my inbox. Buried between acquisition rumors and quarterly earnings was a headline that made my pulse steady instead of spike. Exclusive. MediaMax faces compliance shakeup after anonymous report triggers terminations. No names, not yet. But anyone who worked in their marketing division would know exactly who the senior account director and junior coordinator were. Gossip didn't need names. It thrived on context. And this story had all the context it needed. By 9 a.m., LinkedIn was already moving faster than the official press. Connections were whispering in comment sections, recruiters were distancing themselves with suspiciously timed posts about integrity and leadership, and old colleagues of Trevor's from Chicago were suddenly very loud about seeing this behavior before. That's when I nudged the process forward. I didn't need to fabricate anything. The truth was lethal enough. All I did was feed the archive into the right channels, not the tabloids, not some revenge blog. No, I seeded it quietly into 3 private industry Slack groups and 2 Reddit forums frequented by marketing professionals. The archive spread like oxygen meeting flame. Screenshots of GPS logs, credit card receipts, and those nauseating late-night vibes playlists didn't just confirm the rumors, they obliterated any space for denial. By lunch, Nora and Trevor weren't just whispers, they were case studies. I didn't have to lift another finger. Their own digital footprints were tearing them apart. At 1:30 p.m., one of Nora's co-workers posted a thinly veiled jab on Twitter. "When you tell your boss you're working late, but HR finds your strategy session playlist on Spotify." Compliance fail. MediaMax. It went viral within the hour, and that's when the hammer dropped. MediaMax's official PR team released a statement by 3 p.m. confirming disciplinary actions against employees who failed to disclose a personal relationship in violation of company policy. They didn't use names, but the press didn't need them. Every journalist in the city was already circling, fueled by the screenshots I'd made sure found their way into inboxes. By evening, I watched it unfold in real time. Trevor's LinkedIn bio quietly edited to remove MediaMax. Nora's Instagram was deleted. Rebecca's Facebook was flooded with condolences, thinly veiled rage, and offers of support during this betrayal. And me, sitting back with a glass of whiskey, watching the dominoes fall exactly in the sequence I'd lined up. What had started on Monday as a surgical strike inside a corporate system had, by Thursday, become a full-scale implosion across careers, families, and reputations. And I wasn't even finished. By Friday morning, the storm had consumed them. Nora tried to call again, this time from a blocked number, but I let it ring out. I didn't need to hear her voice anymore. I already knew the script: denial, bargaining, rage, tears. None of it mattered now. The system had already finished what I started. At 10:14 a.m., an internal HR bulletin leaked to the press. Trevor Daniels, terminated effective immediately. Nora Hartwell, suspended pending final review, escorted off premises. The words, escorted off premises, were all I needed to picture it. Her cardboard box of desk trinkets clutched in her arms, security flanking her down the glass hallway while colleagues pretended not to stare. The same Nora who once bragged about building her empire was now carrying a box of dead dreams past people she used to impress. By lunchtime, Media Max's PR team had gone into full spin control, issuing statements about renewed commitment to ethical standards and proactive measures to ensure compliance. But the truth was already viral. Their names were burned into group chats, Slack channels, and local business blogs. Nobody would hire them. Nobody would trust them. I made my final moves quietly. At 1 p.m., I sat in my lawyer's office and signed the last of the documents. The lease transferred fully into my name, the bank accounts split, every joint obligation dissolved. By law and by finance, she no longer existed in my world. At 3 p.m., I posted a single photo to my LinkedIn. Me, standing at a tech conference panel, badge around my neck, skyline of the city behind the stage. The caption was short, almost clinical. Some systems crash, others get rebuilt, moving forward. It wasn't revenge porn. It wasn't slander. It was a signal to the world, to anyone watching, that I hadn't been destroyed. I'd debugged my life, cut the corrupted files, and moved on. That night, I walked past our old apartment one last time. Through the window, I saw the movers I'd hired carrying out the last of her boxes into storage. No lights on, no laughter, no trace of the woman who once swore she loved me. Just silence and the hollow echo of lies dismantled. Trevor was at home, probably facing Rebecca's lawyers with a custody petition on the table. Nora was back in her childhood bedroom, scrolling job boards she'd never qualify for again. And me? I was free. Freedom is underrated until you've tasted it after betrayal. It doesn't scream, it doesn't gloat. It just walks away, leaving ruins in its wake. And sometimes silence is the loudest revenge of all.